Decolonizing bodies, one dance at a time. Colonizers चले गए पर intergenerational trauma छोड़ गए. In 1757, at the Battle of Plassey, East India Company established its colonial rule in India. In 1857, the British Raj, that is the Crown Rule, was established in India to continue with exploitation colonialism. 89 years of colonial rule later, in 1947, even though India was geopolitically decolonized, the impact of colonization is still felt through the current generation of brown bodies. The first seed of what it is to be a brown body was felt in my own experience in my training as a dance woman psychotherapist in the UK in 2011. I felt like there was this internal white reverence, and my generational conditioning made me, which was a part of my sense of self, changed the way I was expressing myself intrapersonally and interpersonally. One of my biggest areas that I struggled with was trying to explain my mental health experiences in English. If you look at therapeutic trainings in India and abroad, all of them are in English, right? But somebody like me who's multilingual, not just in verbal languages but also in artistic languages, found it very difficult to really speak in English about my sensations, my bodily experiences, and my lived experiences. The colonial rulers made a systematic attempt to make us feel like English is a superior language. The language that they come from is superior than our own local languages. How did I carry that in my own body? So one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is the shame that I felt in myself, right? I felt very proud of being able to talk in English compared to my other cousins who were either from vernacular mediums or Hindi medium or Gujarati medium. I felt shame in telling my friends that I go to play Garba all 9 days. I clearly don't feel that anymore, as you can see. My daughter now plays Garba, and intergenerational trauma healing can happen when we indigenize ourselves and bring ourselves closer to our own cultural practices. Now, why would you think that mental health is connected with language? Languages of our ancestry, right? Do we think in the same language as we feel? Do we experience the same images? What really happens to us in our bodies when we feel differently in a different language, whether it's language or an artistic language, right? I'll give you an example from my family member himself. One of the very elderly uncles that I have refused to sit in a car that his son was driving because he turned around and he said, "Mara hriday na patya besi jai. Aloka sathe to I will not sit in the car only." Meaning that I will not sit in a car when my son is driving because my heart muscles stop, right? Now, as a psychologist, I would say this person experiences anxiety. How does the word anxiety or palpitations really capture the intensity of his own emotional experience? It doesn't, right? And that's what English does sometimes, is it discounts that in our local languages, we talk about mental health through bodily experiences. In my work with neurodivergent beings who are probably not at the same verbal space as you or I are, or in my work within the community setups where I'm working with those who speak Marathi or the Adivasi dialect is their primary form of communication, right? The technique, the terminology, the approach, everything is English. Then how do you really see a community? How do you offer them resources that match how they feel in their bodies, their sense of being, and their identity? It's very difficult. But that's where my work as dance movement therapy comes in. Art forms offer no certainty to us, but what they offer is possibility. Possibility to be in touch with yourself, possibility to check in with your ancestral resources, possibility to reach out to others in your community, and to work with the larger collective, spiritual or otherwise. A lot of this experience is delegitimized, suppressed, or unacknowledged by our own coloniality, the one that is internalized so deep within us. So what is colonization, right? Colonization created cultural stagnation. It created a loss of traditional knowledge systems, psychological trauma. It disconnected us from our own land and from our heritage. It created economic distance and dependence in some castes and especially indigenous populations. How does this then show up in our bodies? We experience the world in binaries, in mental health and physical health. We internalize the oppression that we've experienced. Maybe you and I have not been directly colonized by people who colonized us, but we have had grandparents who've had these experiences, and how those experiences have flown and sort of come to us brings us dissonance in our bodies. It creates intergenerational trauma. So what does decolonizing mean, right? I've been harping about this word, decolonizing, decolonizing, decolonizing. Decolonizing means critically looking at what are the systems of your conditioning. What is it that you've embodied? What is it that you see as shameful and inferior in your own culture? And understanding it a little bit better. Yes, making informed choices. What does indigenizing then mean? If decolonizing means critically evaluating it, indigenizing means infusing your life with cultural practices. It may be the food of your culture, it may be the language of your culture, it may be the embroidery, the song, the storytelling, but infusing yourself with these practices. What I now want to talk about is neocolonialism. Neocolonialism was created even while the colonial rulers were leaving us. What did it do? It created a power vacuum. So people who were colonized then became oppressors, right? So first it was white bodies colonizing brown bodies, and we've continued that same system of representation where brown bodies colonize brown bodies. Social location, the power that I hold in my own body. Yes? So very quickly just sort of putting this here, that I am somebody who is in no particular order. I'm a Savarna. I'm educated in English in university and at school level. I am upper class, upper caste, Jain Gujarati, married to a Maharashtrian. I'm ancestrally a settler to the state of Maharashtra, but I'm born and raised. I'm an artist, I'm an educator, I'm a researcher. I have so many of these identities, right? And my lived experience of mental health is very specific to where intersectionally I lie on this location. Now, how is this important in mental health? It's important because when I approach a community, I understand my own lived experience and my social location. But when I do this through my body, through the movements, if we have space where we can co-create, I get to understand their lived experiences through my own body. Indigenous arts are essentially intermodal, right? When I say the word intermodal, it means that different modalities are used to come in together. Intermodal arts and indigenous arts are very powerful decentering agents of change. They take the power from me and offer it back to the community. I'm able to then sit with them, co-create with them, where they feel that they have the power in a therapeutic setup, which doesn't really happen when you go to private practice, where the therapist feels like the expert, right? Women and children who are survivors of violence, when they're compounded by systemic marginalization, I encourage them to bring in dances from their own cultures and their own indigeneity into the space. What does this do? Movements are very simple. They're essentially icebreakers. But it is a part of a representation of their own identity. What does folk dance then offer to us? Folk dance offers rhythm. Folk dance offers repetition. And when there is rhythm and repetition, it creates a playful holding space. And in this playful holding space, we work and bring in resilience. Resilience to work through this trauma. Repetition will create safety and control. It is a key area for work. When we work with safety, it's very important to work with this because I'm working with people who have experienced sexual trauma, who have experienced emotional violence, who have experienced physical violence. If trauma is stored in the body, it is in the body that it will find its resolution. So let's talk very quickly about neurobiology. Why dance, right? I've talked about folk dance, I've talked about mental health, languages, but what does dance really do at a neurobiological level? It's a quick hack. It releases neurotransmitters like dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, and oxytocin. It reduces the level of cortisol. It allows for neural synchrony to happen. It allows me to repattern my neural pathways, therefore neuroplasticity can actually be real for me. In short, I'm saying that neuroscience is finally catching up with indigenous wisdom. I have consent for now what I'm about to share with you through the images and through the stories. I work with migrant daily wage workers who are female and able-bodied. They are survivors of violence. And one of the women that I recently worked with was a participant. She recently migrated from the borders of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So when you come to Mumbai, you don't experience the same language holding that you would experience in the south, right? She didn't understand the tereko, mereko, apun, tapun. That's the language that we were used to speaking to each other in. So I invited her to add movements from her indigenous culture to the group. She came in, very constricted body, hesitated, fidgeting, eyes darting here and there. And with a lot more holding and encouragement from the group members, she brought in the steps of Kummi dance. Now, for those of you who don't know what Kummi dance is a group where you come into a circle and the women perform this using claps. Sometimes they face each other in the circle and sometimes they face each other in the dyads. What this did was it created very simple choreographies, right? She started opening up, the group started smiling. They would laugh at each other if somebody was disoriented in the dance. They would support each other so that they could move into the dance. What really happened in this moment? They saw her as a whole. They saw her as a person who had value, who could create something and not just as a survivor of violence. So she created something for the group. She offered that to the group. The group accepted it. They played with it. And in this process, they became more embodied. After the session, we talked about what really happened in our bodies, what shifted, right? Because this is a group that would scatter after a session and suddenly everyone is still in the same circle that they were dancing in. What really happened? And this is what somebody else said. They said, obviously they said it in Hindi and I have to translate it in English for you, but here it goes. I feel like I have the support of the group here and that we are not just connected in our horrors but also in our power. I feel like I am Shakti, and after many days, I feel alive. Arts is a language, right? A lot of us may not be taught how to process difficult experiences as a child. One of the spaces that I work with houses displaced children who come from adverse living or familial conditions. What we do in arts, we work with it. They're so excited to share where they come from, what is precious to them, how they want to build their relationships. In dance therapy, we navigate through these internalized narratives of classism, casteism, sexism, ableism. In movement, we learn to restore our own ruptures, right? So if you look at some of the images that are about to come up now, we've worked with projections, embodying the experience, you project it, you play with it, and then we reframe it so that we can integrate it, yes? The first image is an image of motherhood. When we ask the male members of the group, what is it? What is your connection with motherhood? They said, our mother does a lot of these things. But if you see the first boy, his vision is sort of blocked, right? Because what the boy is saying is, nobody asks my mother what my mother really needs. If you look at image number 2, right? It is, you can see a representation of young girl from Kolkata performing Durga Puja, right? She's showing what Durga looks like. Image number 3, you can see a young boy draped in a sari, right? If you look at it, you can see how joyous he is, because what does he really want to feel in connection? He wants to feel connected to his mother. And taking a dupatta and draping it around connects him to his mother. Number 3 is about the boy, but number 4 is about even a younger boy. He feels validated because he is really, what is he doing? If he's playing and he's dancing, he's being validated by 2 other older members of the group. Number 5 is, you can see images of happiness in home, anger has no words, Sadness is felt in the body and anxiety is confusion. So arts, what it really does is it connects us without the need to mask. DMT warm-up, the main process work, the cool down, all of this happens together, and the assessment and termination process is the same as any therapy. But what is really different about dance therapy? What is really different is that in your DMT session, all of your body is welcome. It has a voice. If you look at the current research that I'm currently doing, I'm grateful to the Varli elders for sharing this information and this knowledge with me. Most of us have seen commercialized Wali art forms around in Xavier's itself. You can see it in our bags, in stores, right? It is a representation of their traditions, their beliefs, their connection with nature. They are deeply Prakriti Pujak. They work through oppression and displacement. They have this philosophy of the Kahankar and the Ahankar, right? The maker and affirmer of the spoken word. So when I look at it in my own lived experience, the body is the Kahankar and my being is the Ahankar, where I'm asking my consciousness to look beyond that which is conscious, to look beyond that which is apparent, and really build a dialogue with my own body. Storytelling is a pedagogical tool in the Adivasi community which connects us to the wisdom with our ancestors. Ancestors don't see the world in binaries. If you look at any kind of health work, it is social, communal, environmental, political, emotional, and cognitive as well as physical. Now that you know all these things, right, being disembodied serves the neo-colonizers. It does not serve us. But what would you still do? You will still prefer your physical health over your mental health. You will still go to a cardiologist till you don't find an answer to your heart palpitations before going to a psychiatrist. Even in mental health, if you go to a psychiatrist, you'll go to a psychiatrist, go to a psychologist, go to a counselor and give them one chance. And the moment you don't connect with them, you say, oh, therapy is all humbug, it does not work, right? What I'm really saying is we're still colonized. West does not know best. Being non-West is not being anti-West. And my last call to action is this. If you want to start somewhere and oppression is the norm, start with re-inhabiting your body. Will you join the resistance or resist this resistance? Thank you.